Hi, Lou here with part 2 of the evolution of D&D and RPGs. And I'm going through the editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Well, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was what we call the first edition. Of course, it wasn't first, but it was the first hardcover edition. And we usually count Unearthed Arcana as part of these rules, so there's 4 books: the DMG, Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, and Unearthed Arcana. These books cleaned up the rules and added a lot of detail and added more variety. There was an emphasis again on combined arms, just as in the original D&D, to get the job done. And combined arms is when different skills, in this case of different character classes, are combined so that the result is greater than the sum of the parts. Magic users caused the greatest damage, for example, but were most vulnerable, like a quarterback in American football, so they had to be protected. It was all part of the cooperation of the different capabilities. So combined arms emphasized cooperation. Danger was also emphasized. A quote from Gary Gygax, who wrote these books and is co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons. Quote, "A good campaign must have an element of danger and real risk, or else it is meaningless. Death walks at the shoulder of all adventurers, and that is the true appeal of the game." It was the possibility of dying that improved cooperation immensely. If you don't worry about dying, then cooperation tends to disappear. Now, the second edition to me was a tweaked and cleaned up first edition. They did add such things as character skills that I didn't use, and to me it was a sort of non-entity. The big change came with the third edition. And the third edition includes 3.0 and 3.5, and Pathfinder follows 3.5, or the original Pathfinder did. And this is where the one-man army comes into play. Each character was survivable on its own, and consequently combined arms and cooperation were minimized. And it's almost inevitable because they expected parties of just 4 characters. Well, Lou's law of survival is the survivability of a party varies with the square of the number of characters. If you've only got 4 characters, they had better individually be really powerful because they can't do much to protect each other, and there's just not very many of them. Third edition also had crunchy character generation, lots of detail, and it took a long time. And that made character generation a barrier to joining play. There were huge stat blocks for the monsters. And I remember being at a convention and listening to editors moaning about those huge stat blocks and how hard they were to get right. So one-man army goes a long way to killing the cooperative aspects that were inherent and I think essential in older D&D. Every man for himself becomes practical. Now the 4th edition is very different. I remember saying after reading it that it might be a good game, but it wasn't D&D. And I have to say, when I played, it was D&D as far as it went, but it was focused almost entirely on combat, leaving out the non-combat and strategy-based side of D&D. Well, the odd thing here is that rules-based combat is what computers excel at, not people. Evidently there was an idea of making D&D more computer-friendly or computer-involved, but that failed to materialize, and the 4th edition pretty much fell on its face. At least the 4th edition emphasized cooperation. Many of the character classes had powers that specifically helped others in the party as well as themselves. It emphasized also at least 1 power per class that was always available to use. No one ever did nothing in a round, just as in computer games where constant activity is the expectation. But in earlier editions and in warfare itself, frequently you would just have to wait. You have to be patient. Well, you didn't have to be patient in 4th edition, just as in video games. And then you had healing surges and other rules that made it very hard for a character to die. And the healing surges especially remind me of respawning in computer games. The 5th edition then is the latest edition. One person said it was like first edition cleaned up and updated, and there's a lot of truth to that. It has quick and easy character generation so that you can get right to the adventure. It's the opposite of crunchy. They even provide standard backgrounds for characters to help speed up generation. Character ability numbers are generated by deterministic rather than stochastic methods. In other words, they don't use dice rolling. And that tended to squash the cheating that was rampant in old D&D, where somebody would roll 10 or 100 characters and then pick the best one and have sky-high stats that helped him every day thereafter, him or her. Now, advantage and disadvantage rules are brilliantly simple in 5th edition, and they have a brilliant method of reducing how many major magic items someone can use at a time. There's also a modern emphasis on spells and healing to avoid death, making it again much harder to get killed. The Revivify spell, for example. There's more feel of respawning in the long rest, bringing back all the hit points. The influence of video games again. Now, what's in the future? Wizards of the Coast is trying to prevent it, but sooner or later RPGs usually collapse under the weight of many rules editions, and then a new edition is released. Will that ever happen? Will there be a 6th edition? I don't know. Thanks for listening.